This Ken Burns American Revolution documentary, it's a dud, folks. It's a dud. Now, yes, it's well produced. And it's long as hell, 12 hours. So I watched this thing, and I couldn't make it through the second episode. And of course, Ken Burns, as usual, hits you every 20 minutes talking about slavery, or how blacks were oppressed, Native Americans. And I'm not going to deny that that happened. That happened, but guess what? That happened to a lot of groups in the past. But what I want to focus on here are two people who worked on this project. One being Sarah Botstein, and the other, Peter Coyote. Now, Peter Coyote, it gets pretty juicy with Peter Coyote here. So, Sarah Botstein, she attended Barnard College, which is a liberal arts college for women. I believe it's Columbia University, or part of Columbia University. And they have their own website. So they have a couple articles on there where she was being interviewed. And this was during the Ken Burns documentary about the Holocaust. And she's talking about how Native Americans, or the Native American experience, the black experience, the immigrant experience, that was a negative part of our history, and they really built this country. And I'm not going to deny that they didn't help build this country. But being somebody who is of Irish, German, and Cherokee Iroquois descent, and who has family that goes back to the 1700s in Kentucky, in Maryland, Virginia, who lived out west in the Old West, the Motherlode, I can tell you that living someplace and getting to know the history of the area from the people who live there is a lot different than what you see on film, in a documentary, in a history book. But that just goes to show you her level of thinking here. Is that America is racist, sexist, homophobic, and it's always been that way. And the founders were hypocrites, because how can they be talking about freedom when they themselves owned slaves? Well, not everybody during the American Revolution owned slaves. But what she forgets, and what Peter Coyote forgets, is that they were slaves under the king. You see, in those days, you didn't go against the king. You didn't go against your tribal leaders. And what's funny about this American Revolution, or as I call it, the American Devolution documentary, is Ken Burns makes these vague references to how these slaves were captured. They were captured in Senegal, in Algeria, in certain parts of Africa, wherever it was. But he doesn't tell you who exactly captured them. Doesn't mention the fact that not only did George Washington own slaves, but he had white indentured servants that worked on his property. And when the American Revolution broke out that very week, there were ads in the papers for not only runaway slaves, but runaway white indentured servants. Now let's talk about Peter Coyote. So Peter Coyote's real name is, or his former name is, Robert something Cohen. And after smoking peyote, now this is when he attended, I think it's Grinnell College in Iowa. Actually, I don't live too far from Iowa. So shout out to all those you who are watching in Iowa. By the way, welcome back to the channel, Culture Confederacy here. It's Monday. Happy Monday, everybody. Now, if you're new to the channel, I don't use any fancy graphics here. What you see is what you get. So you get a still shot. Which reminds me, this whole thing with Ken Burns. Let me just sum up a Ken Burns documentary to you. He has these still shots, normally black and white. He zooms in, and he zooms out, and he zooms in again, and he zooms out again. Then he throws in random quotes that have nothing to do with each other. And he hammers you over the head every 20 minutes talking about slavery or oppression. Again, not denying that some of that happened. But the founders were slaves under the king, and you didn't go against the king. If you did, you either got excommunicated, you were banished, or you could be executed. That's the way it was. But Peter Coyote had this experience with peyote. And after he smoked some peyote now, do you ingest it? Do you smoke it? I heard you smoked it. Or you smoke it. But after he ingested this peyote now, he had a vision. You see, he interacted with an animal spirit. And the next morning, at dawn, he found these paw prints in a cornfield. Supernatural. So he goes out to San Francisco. I forget where he attended on the East Coast, but he graduated from some college, I think in New York City. Got a degree in English Lit, then goes out to San Francisco. And he joined this group called the Diggers, which was like an offshoot of the Beats back in the day. And these were part of the counterculture. The Haight-Ashbury district in San Francisco. Actually, I've been there. My aunt and uncle had a place in Oakland, so one day we went out to San Francisco. Actually, San Francisco is a great city. It really is, if you get to know San Francisco. Or at least it used to be a great city. But when I was there, I had a lot of fun. This was probably about a decade or so ago. But when I was out there, I had a lot of fun. And it's actually a beautiful city. There's certain parts you can go to that a lot of people aren't familiar with. It's all, separated in these different districts. Like you have the gay district, or you have the Italian district, this district or that district. But San Francisco is a beautiful city. But I digress here. But he goes out to San Francisco. So Peter Coyote, who had this supernatural experience, ends up joining this group called the Diggers. They end up having all these communes on the West Coast. And this mime troupe he was with, they were arrested for for performing in a park or in the parks in that area without a permit. But this is the person who is narrating these Ken Burns documentaries, and he's going to sit there and say that we had an Iroquois Confederacy, and the Iroquois Confederacy is what inspired Benjamin Franklin. Now let's talk about this issue of slavery and Native Americans. Again, yes, it's true. Some of the founders had slaves, but they also had white indentured servants. And at that time, in the late 18th century, early 1900s, or 1800s rather, well, even going into the early part of the 20th century, society was built on more of a class system. So groups like the Irish, or freemen, or slaves, Chinese, you name it, a lot of those immigrants were lumped into the same social and economic category. But he misses the boat here. Ken Burns misses the boat because the reason that we had the revolution is because of things like the Intolerable Acts. Because the king wouldn't let them go out west. And yes, there were conflicts with Native Americans, but the King of England, he was hiring a lot of these Native Americans to attack the colonists. A lot of this goes on with any conflict. So this is nothing new. What was happening or the tactics that were being used during the American Revolution are the same tactics that were probably being used during ancient Egypt or Rome, Greece. Remember, the Greeks fought against the Persians. So the times might change, but human nature doesn't. But having family that goes back to that time period, and being somebody who writes music in his spare time, who've studied that time period, and these composers and artists who were affected by what happened with, let's say, the French Revolution or the American Revolution. It was a much different time. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have all the comforts of home that we have now. And they were just starting to understand this idea of the right to man, because for centuries they had lived under the divine right of kings. And again, you didn't go against the king. You didn't go against the tribal leader. And you had tribal leaders in Africa, tribal chiefs that were selling people into slavery. Ken Burns, which he failed to mention in this documentary. So it may seem hypocritical to us now that the founders, these people were fighting during the American Revolution when they had slaves or indentured servants, but they were still slaves under the king. You didn't go against the king. And what they wanted basically a second Europe for white men. What they meant by that was a second Europe for us as Europeans, without a king, with representation by the people for the people. And they were trying to protect their rights that were guaranteed to them under what they called the ancient constitutions guaranteed by Parliament. But 12 hours for this thing? So tell me what you think in the comments section below. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do. You can follow me at Instagram. I've just had that updated, so find me at Instagram, Jason197711, or go to Substack. And now you can find me at Culture Confederacy, at Culture Confed1 on X. So this is the Culture Confederacy saying peace out, stay safe, everybody. God bless. Keep up the culture. I'll catch you next time, and y'all have a great Monday. Take care.